I'm Caroline Dowd-Higgins. Thank you for listening to Your Working Life, my podcast series featuring thought leaders in the career and personal growth arena. Now, I know that you spend a significant portion of your life at work, so I'm on a mission to provide you with tools, inspiration, and resources so you can enjoy your career and love your life. And I'm so delighted to welcome my very special guest, Dr. Bernd Schoner, to the show. Bernd, welcome. I'm so glad that you're with me today.
Thank you, Caroline. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome, and you've got an exciting new book. Your book is called The Blood, Sweat, Tears, and Laughs of Entrepreneurship, the Tech Entrepreneur's Survival Guide, how to bootstrap your startup, lead through tough times, and cash in for success. I'm so excited about this book. It's really, really wonderful. And it just came out a few weeks ago, so congratulations.
Thank you. I'm
So I
excited
want
too.
to tell my audience a little bit about you. You worked in the Physics and Media Group and the Things That Think Research Consortium at the MIT Media Laboratory, where you earned your PhD. And after graduating, you co-founded the high-tech startup ThingMagic, which nearly 10 years later was sold to Trimble Navigation, a multi-billion-dollar public technology company. And now you serve as VP of Business Development at Trimble Navigation. And I'm really excited to hear what inspired you to write this book.
There were a number of things. Maybe the funniest one was I was nearing midlife and needed an outlet for for a little bit of extra energy. So some of the excitement of the last days of ThingMagic as an independent company went into the book. So that was the year 2010 when we got ready to sell the company, and that brought all kinds of interesting dynamics to life. We are between the investors, the founders, the management. And I felt at the time that it was worth capturing those moments of anxiety, and that became the basis of the book. Even though then later it was transformed in something much more comprehensive, covering the entire life cycle from the day we got started all the way to the exit, and then the life, the corporate life that we have been living since then.
Right. So, Bernd, I'd love for you to tell us about ThingMagic. Tell us about this company. It'll better help us understand your journey as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, it is definitely an interesting story, and it is unusual in the sort of general landscape of startups. We got started here in Cambridge, basically one block from MIT, and which is a very typical start. But we started with a very broad agenda, not a very focused one. So our goal was to continue to develop interesting technologies, not necessarily with a product focus, but with a technology and prototyping focus. At the same time, we didn't want to lose out on the potential financial benefits of a startup.
Right.
So that's why we decided to leave academia and found our own for-profit company. So that's how we got started, and we basically funded the company for the first 5 years by doing this kind of development projects, typically for larger Fortune 500 companies. And then after 2 to 5 years, we realized that there was a particular need in RFID, and that was an area where we had good expertise coming out of MIT. So that's when we gradually transitioned our business model to become a RFID product company. That was in 2005. We converted the company to a corporation. We raised a lot of venture capital. And for the next 5 years, we basically had the second identity as an RFID product company before we finally sold it.
Now, I love that you helped us understand the timeline of that because it wasn't instantaneous. It was progressive and incremental. And that's what I love about the book. You talk about scaling your business, which is such a crucial step.
Yeah, and sometimes scaling doesn't happen the way you anticipated.
Right.
Right. When you come out of MIT, you think, and you watch all the success stories of big tech startups that become worth billions of dollars in no time. That's sort of the expectation you have, and then you realize that those stories are really the very, very rare exception. And
Right.
the reality of startup life is that you have to fight for every dollar, and you have to fight for every percentage of growth. And it can take a long time to build it into something substantial. So that was our experience, right? It was we had a lot of patience, we had a lot of persistence, and we worked very hard at it, and ultimately were rewarded with a successful exit. But it took 10 years.
It took 10 years, right? It wasn't the overnight success. And that's what I appreciate, the candor and the honesty about the process, because you really have written a beautiful survival guide. And I think about how many startups don't make it because they just don't know. They don't understand the long journey.
Yeah, and as I said, in the beginning, you have sort of one idea, and then for many young companies, when they hit their first stumbling block, right, when they first realize that what they thought was quick and easy is
Yeah,
actually a hard and long process. That's the first time that a lot of ventures fall apart. And
right.
we have hit many of those in our
Of
venture, and I
course.
was
Yeah,
glad that we lived through all of them, including the major crisis in our industry and the world economic crisis in 2008.
right,
Um,
right.
yeah, those are mostly external events, right? It's not even that you
Yeah.
fail or you do something wrong and then things don't go as you wanted. It's a lot of it is hitting those roadblocks that are thrown at you without you doing anything
Mm-hmm.
bad or
Mm-hmm.
or suboptimal.
Exactly. So you talked about how you started this business after minting your degree at MIT. So many recent college graduates, whether they're on the undergraduate or the master's or the doctoral level, are really jumping into the entrepreneurial ring. What should a newly minted college grad think about before venturing into a startup?
Well, I mean, I think the first thing to say in response to that question is, just go and do it. Especially coming out of college, I cannot think of a better complement to an academic education
Mm,
than doing your own startup. The reality, especially early on, is that you will be doing so many jobs and you will be learning so many things, like I did more than 10 years ago. Um, and all of those weren't taught at MIT, but they're not rocket science. You can learn
right.
them, and it's exciting, and it really teaches you how to run a business in a sort of all around way, right? So that's the good news. And the other I think very positive thing there, and I think ultimately the reason why I stayed with that, and I still think that entrepreneurship is one of the best careers out there, is that in no other field go out, leave college, and you have the opportunity to both shape technology
Yeah.
and build an institution. Right? You typically end up somewhere in an organization and you make your contribution, but it doesn't have this all-encompassing um, element of um, building something new and building something that will last. Right?
Right, right. So let me ask you this too. Having been through it, what would you advise for prospective employees considering joining a team of a startup, right? As your first job out of university, for example, and you've been invited to join a startup team, what do you need to know?
So maybe I just finish quickly the answer to the last question that you
Sure.
had, which is the the big issue with entrepreneurship and being a founder is that you have to be able to deal with uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It is
Ambiguity, right.
impossible to predict what you're going to do and how successful you will be, which product you will ultimately be selling. So you can make plans, but then things will change, and you have to be able to deal with that and say, okay, I don't know where I'll be in 5 years, but it should be an interesting ride, right?
Right.
Uh, for employees, the equation is slightly different. I mean, the basic idea, the basic trade-off between a large corporation or a small startup is still there. But as an employee, you're a little bit removed from this. What happens if it doesn't go that way, or we're going this way? If there's a layoff, then the employee goes first.
Right, right.
Typically, at least. So there's those elements of risk are also there, but I think the element of uncertainty is a little less so, right? So you wouldn't join on day one when there's nothing there. As a founder, by definition, you do. And as an employee, you join typically a 5 to 50 person team, and it's already a little clearer where that thing is going, right?
Right.
But the other thing to keep in mind, if for young engineers or graduates who are facing that decision between do I do my own thing or do I join another company, even if it's small, the events where a startup employee becomes super rich are actually fairly rare.
Right.
So you better like that kind of environment and like that kind of work for what it is. Don't think or basically plan for being a millionaire within a couple of years by joining a startup. The reality is that the equity packages and all the compensation packages in general for employees are certainly not bad, especially in the current market, but they result in multi-million-dollar exit payouts very, very rarely. So that's another, I think, bias that we get from the media, that we learn about the very, very large successes, right? The Facebooks and the Twitters and whatnot. And those are very rare. And the more realistic outcome is that you'll be living a happy middle-class life. And once in a while, there's maybe an extra bonus. Could be enough for a house, but more likely it's enough for a car. So that's, I think that's a fundamental trade-off that a young potential entrepreneur faces between those two choices.
Well, and you talk about this so beautifully in the book about paying yourself and your employees. So again, you've got to be willing to understand the ebb and flow of the cash, correct?
Yeah, so that's one. Obviously, that cash flow issue is very prominent in the life of a startup management team, founder. And whether you are bootstrapping like we did for 5 years, or you start taking in serious capital, the money is always running out.
Yeah.
there's
Always.
never a time where you can say, "Oh, now we're all set."
Right. Right.
Obviously, if you have revenue and there's a baseline there, that helps because you may not be able to meet your expenses, but you at least have substantial cash flow to as a foundation. But especially if you're going for venture capital, then that money will be spent, and before you know it, you will be in the capital markets again looking for more. So that cash flow issue is always there.
Yeah, it is. So what's your advice to entrepreneurs who are struggling with that emotionally? Because it's physically and mentally demanding, and the money isn't always robust in the beginning, right? So how do you balance that? For example, maybe give us some experiences you had in the early stages of ThingMagic.
Well, I think the first. I'm trying to think back and what I was telling myself when I would face that situation.
Right.
And there were really two things. One is that I wouldn't want to be in a different professional situation.
Okay.
What I'm doing right now is what I want to do, and it's great. So I better learn how to live with those stressful situations, right? And the other one is that it's not that by going corporate you're escaping those realities of the basically corporate America, right? Today, being laid off and downsizing is a reality of professional lives, and
Very
it
much
doesn't
so.
say anything about your capabilities or it's not a sign of failure, right? If a corporation lays off thousands of people. You just have to deal with it and find another job and move on, right? And in a startup, I think those pressures are more direct, right? You because maybe in part because you see those books every day,
Right.
and they're not hidden. But at the end of the day, it's a similar game, right? If things are going tough, and if you can't find financing, or if the business plan has to be changed, then yeah, people may have to get laid off. And then one of the realities of being a founder versus an employee is that you know as a founder, if you're not, as long as you're not screwing up completely, you are ultimately in a better position to stay put or find something else to do when the thing really fails.
Well, what I find fascinating is that you mentioned early on in ThingMagic, your team established a principle that every founder and key executive received the same salary compensation, pardon me. Tell us why you recommended that and what other options are out there.
Well, in part, this structure was motivated by our bootstrapping approach at the time, which was basically a year or so into the company. And interestingly, that salary level we established because a lot of our 3 of our 5 co-founders were non-Americans, and we had to basically pay us enough so that the immigration services were happy.
Of course, of
So,
course.
so that became the baseline salary that we would pay ourselves. And then beyond that, the realization was that, especially when you can't pay yourself market salaries, right?
Right.
If you have enough to do that, then it's a slightly different game. But if you can't do that, you might as well say, look, we are not in this for the cash. We are not in this for next month's salary. We have to pay ourselves something because we all need to live and eat. But really, why we're doing this because eventually the equity will be worth
Right.
a lot, and that's what we're all working towards. Right?
So patience is essential, correct?
Patience is very, very important.
So, Bernd, I'd love to hear more about your pros and con advice about taking venture capital. I know so many aspiring entrepreneurs that are in the startup phase think, oh, if I only had venture support. But there's more to it than that. So, walk us through that.
So, yeah, there's a few downsides of venture capital or equity investments in general that are worth mentioning and keeping in mind, and they're not sort of top of the mind of the young founder who would take any money to keep going, right?
Right.
And that is that, yeah, in many ways, venture capital is sort of the worst of all funds because venture capitalists definitely want their money back. So it's like a bank loan that way,
Right.
and
Right.
they get it back before anybody else gets anything. And then secondly, they want a 10x return, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And anything that's in the way of that, even if it's consistent with what the founders of the company wants, they will fight, right? So, but the biggest downside with venture capital is that notion that the moment you take capital, you have to get that capital and more back to the investors before you get anything. So, basically, you can do the math in your head. The problem is most founders don't do it. But the moment you take capital, you have to sell your company at a multiple of that number to get anything yourself. And that's the simple arithmetic that people tend to forget
Mm-hmm.
when they get excited about a term sheet that would keep them going for another year.
Right. Do the math. Very good. Very good. So we both know that it is stressful and emotionally and physically demanding. So how does one in the entrepreneurial sphere manage work life and personal life in the early stages of their startup? What did you do when ThingMagic was in its infancy?
So I was in the fortunate position, or I guess a rather straightforward position that I had very little obligations,
Uh-huh.
um, no family to support, no mortgage, no car. I was used to a student life, like
Yeah.
many graduates are, and in a way that's the best that's a great starting point
You have
because
no expectation, right?
that's right. Um, and I was, yeah, my then girlfriend, now wife, had a very demanding career herself. So yeah, you don't notice it if you're working 12 hours a day, and after dinner, you
Go back
work
to work.
again,
Right,
and
right,
it's natural that you go in 7 days a week, right? You bike to work, and Saturday is the same as Sunday is the same as Monday.
right,
Um, but you realize fairly quickly that those years will end, right? That's not a permanent situation.
right.
There comes a time when you get tired or you need to do something else, at least as a hobby again. You need to take care of your family. And I think it's important to realize when that transition happens, and then start building up that other life again. Um, and for me, that meant we were fortunate that we could start hire people. So we had a team that would take care of certain things. Where initially I did everything,
Yeah.
but then there were people there who would be experts and would do take on certain responsibilities. So that's obviously that's a natural transition for a young startup, and it's important for the founder to realize that, and then basically get their life back.
Got it. Got it. Get your life back. Well, it's so fascinating to read the book and hear and listen to your journey. I think it's wonderfully grounding for our aspiring entrepreneurs to know that there is a survival guide and you give us a step-by-step approach. And I want to remind everybody, the book is The Blood, Sweat, Tears, and Laughs of Entrepreneurship, the Tech Entrepreneur's Survival Guide: How to Bootstrap Your Startup, Lead Through Tough Times, and Cash In for Success. So, Bernd, tell us how we can follow you online and how we can buy your book.
So the best thing to do is to go to my website, and one way to get there is to type in bernd.us. So that would be my first name, BERND dot
Hmm.
US. And
Got
that
it.
takes you to my website, and from there you can A, find a lot of additional information, and B, also buy the book.
And the book is now available in Amazon and Barnes& and Noble online as well, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, Bernd Schoner, I want to thank you so much. I wish you great success with this new book, and I thank you so much for sharing your time and expertise, and I hope we'll keep in touch to hear how things are going.
Thank you so much.
Take good care. And I want to thank our listeners for tuning into your working life, where my goal is to help you design your career destiny so it doesn't happen by default. True career and life satisfaction is possible, and it's time to embrace what you love doing so you can do more of it. I'm Caroline Dowd-Higgins. Take good care.